Hey everyone, this is Jim. Welcome to this postmortem of my Blitz game number 992. I had the white pieces and started off with d4. My opponent went d5. I go c4, the queen's gambit, and he plays the traditional queen's gambit declined with e6. So I play knight c3, the main move here. Plays knight f6. And here white has a bunch of interesting choices, but the top two moves are knight f3 and bishop g5. I mentioned bishop g5, I think, during the game. It's an interesting line that Pillsbury liked to play, and it's still good, still popular today. You can also take the exchange variation. E3 immediately is a bit weird. I normally play the knight f3 line because you can always play e3 on the next move. After black has chosen to decline the gambit and just defended here with e6, as this pawn is not hanging at this point, you can always check and recover the pawn. So there's really no need to play e3 here. And knight f3 is a nice way to avoid locking in the bishop for a move. Give your opponent one more move to see how he's going to set up, and then you can decide whether you want to play with e3 or bishop to g5 or bishop f4, which has become very popular in modern chess. Anyway, I played the immediate e3 after he went knight f3, and he went b6. So I don't know, it gives it a question mark. c6 would just transpose into pretty normal looking lines of a semi-Slav. b6, black is going for a Tartakover setup with the fianchetto of the bishop here, typically. Although the way he played it is not that uncommon. Let's see, I play with knight f3. He goes bishop e7, deferring the decision on how to place his light-squared bishop and preparing to castle, and I went ahead and took. Now we're in a section of the database because of my early e3 that this position is not very common, but c takes d5 that I played here, I checked it out also with the chess engine, seems to be a fine move, and the way he took is the main way of playing this. Black wants to keep control of the center, and so he takes back with the pawn, even though that does block in the bishop. If the bishop were on b7, it would be blocked in. But I wanted to do that take just to make sure I knew how black was setting up. He still had the option of taking, wrong button. He still had the option of taking with the knight there. Let's go forward to that point. After I take. Yeah, he had the option of taking back with the knight. And so I just wanted to see if he was going to do that and try and keep this diagonal open, or if he was going to accept the closing of the diagonal. And he did. So this line in the opening book here goes bishop b5 check, c6, and then bishop back to d3. And I just played bishop d3 immediately, and we're out of the book. And I'm not sure that exchange, if I had played bishop b5 and allowed him to play c6, it sort of gives him that move for free, although maybe this pawn wants to go to c5 anyway, so it's not actually losing a tempo like it appears on the surface. But bishop d3 immediately was fine also. I verified that with the chess engine. And now he goes bishop g4, so he's decided that the bishop has better prospects on this side than it does on that b7 square, looking at the pawn. But it was still possible to play with bishop b7 and then maybe try and liberate it with a move like c5. And you get the bishops behind the pawns here, and you have these dynamic hanging pawns, Nimzovich called them. But he didn't go that way. He went with bishop g4. I castled. He castled. So this whole part of the game is actually pretty well played. I mentioned in the comments there were a lot of mistakes, so they're coming up. e3, you could call that a mistake, but that was just kind of a move order. We've gotten into a normal kind of position here that I'm comfortable enough with, so we're all okay. Let's see, I go bishop e2. I decide to break the pin. That seems all right. I went knight bd7, and I decided to play the move knight e5. So yeah, I wasn't at all sure about this one. There's a lot of different ways this could go, but this turns out to be okay. So that was not a mistake either. He takes here, that was fine, and then takes my knight, and I take back. And this is how far I had calculated. And after he moves his knight, I like to make sure the knight's not coming into a good square like g 4 there before playing this way, but his knight really gets pushed back, and he goes to the d7 square. So that's all logical. I was thinking before playing this that maybe f4 was a move here, and checking it out, the chess engine, it's not the favorite move of the chess engine. It likes knight takes d5 that I played. But it is playable. It keeps an advantage for white, and it leads to an interesting position. After f4, black would play c6 to defend his pawns. So I've got a majority of pawns, 5 against 3 over here on the king side. He's got 4 against 2 over on the queen side. It would lead to some nice unbalanced play. So I think that's an interesting way to play. Something you should always consider doing to unbalance the position. But knight takes d5. This is a good move as well, just the best move according to the engine. And then e4 to support it. Actually, the chess engine prefers putting the rook behind the knight here to defend it that way. And also maybe threatening up some potential, making actually more than a potential threat. It's making an immediate threat against the queen, because rook to f6 would win the queen for a rook and a knight. So that's the stronger move there. But I was too pleased with this idea of defending my knight and opening up a line for my bishop that I went ahead and played that. And that's a good move too, so I won't count that as a blunder or a mistake. But rook d1 technically was stronger there. And also we'll see why there's actually a little bit of a problem the way I'm playing, and that's going to show up in a little bit. He played bishop d6, just defending his knight. But I can kick that knight away with f4 at any time, so I wasn't especially worried about that. The bishop is kind of lining up against my king here, though I do have to be careful about that. Let's see, I went with bishop to e3. And he went rook c8. So the chess engine did not like rook c8. It wants black to play c6 immediately and kick my knight out of that good square, and I would have to drop back to c3. But he went rook c8, and I went rook a to c1. So that was my first real mistake. So yeah, things are getting a bit dicey there in the center, and rook a to c1. Yeah, sorry, I said c8, but I meant rook a to c1. Putting pressure on the c-pawn is not really a very effective move. It would be better to simply play rook to d1, defending the knight, and that would actually free up my pawns in the center a little bit. As we'll see later, that's a problem for me. But there's also this really tactical line that the chess engine finds here, which I just had to show you. And this explains why it thinks black's rook to c8 was a mistake. So I could have played f4 here immediately. Knight would drop back to c6. Then I could play e5. And now he can take e5 like I mentioned in the game, because I do have a loose knight here. I never defended it with a rook, and I pushed the e-pawn forward. But at this point I can play rook to d1, defend it now. Looks like black has won a pawn, but his position is actually a bit of a problem. The bishop has, well, chess engine says it should drop back to d6, and then I can push on with f5. The knight gets pushed back to e7. And then I can play bishop to g5, pinning the knight. Yeah, so we go back to bishop d6. Maybe bishop f6 would have been a wiser choice. But, well, I can take that off with check, but the queen can take back. Yeah, I don't know if there's a problem with bishop to f6. Anyway, this is just the computer line. So it said the bishop should go back to d6, but that runs into this problem where the knight goes here and I pin it. And then, let's see. Yeah, I guess there's other ways to get out of the pin. He could have played f6 here maybe. But maybe these things introduce other problems. Anyway, bishop c5 check, king to h1. And now queen takes d5. The problem is that this knight is pinned, and there's no good way to save it at this point. I can just keep piling up the pressure on it, even if he defends with the rook at this point. So queen takes here, rook takes queen, Knight takes rook. And so what is this? Black has got a pawn and a knight and a rook for a queen. But, I'd be happy to play a position like this as white. Anyway, that just shows, I don't know, the computer's imagination at work, I guess. Anyway, I played rook ac1. As I said, that's a mistake, because I could have simply played rook a to d1, defending my knight. That would have been stronger, or I could have gone for that f4 line as well. Let's see. He played rook e8, defending his knight, and now I play f4. I had that idea. He goes knight g6, and I play e5. But here it's just a blunder, because here he can take. Oh, I should say, instead of e5, if I just drop my knight back to c3, this is actually still quite a good position for white. Everything is defended here. This pawn is adequately defended on f4. And the one on e4 is also defended by the knight. So I've just got my pieces out, and I have more control of the center, and the material's even. So good position for white. That's how I should have played it. So e5 is just a blunder, because he can take with the bishop. And his queen is hitting my knight, and so if I take his bishop, he takes my knight, and it's just even. I'm just down a pawn, I mean. So I have to make another move to defend the knight, and then he can drop his bishop back to d6. I can still go for this line, f5, knight e7, and bishop g5, but it doesn't really help in this case, because the the knight is already defended enough times, so he can actually just unpin immediately. If I try to pin the knight, it just no longer works, and Chess Engine says I should play knight to c3 here, and I'm just down a pawn. So no good. But fortunately for me, he miscalculated something. Black probably saw this idea, and he took with the knight. But that's just a blunder, because that allows me to take here. So maybe he wins a piece back at the end, but he gave up 2 pieces to get it. So that's not what I mean. He just sacrificed a piece there for no reason. So yeah, my knight is hanging, but I have time to defend it here. And I drop back here. Actually, there's other ways to defend the knight. And queen f3 is a nice simple way to defend, because it gets out of the line of the rook here, so it unpins my bishop as well as defending the knight. So queen f3 is a good move. Also rook cd1 is a back up. Rook cd1 is a good way to defend as well. Either of those are better than retreating the knight, because it does leave my queen in a bit of an awkward position here. He goes bishop d4, trying to exploit this. I go rook f3, defending. So yeah, black is still losing, but maybe he gets more out of the position than he should have. Play c5 here. I go queen f2. Goes bishop back to f6. And I go rook to d1, hitting his queen. So this part was okay. Goes queen e7. And now for my next mistake, I play bishop to f4. And this is not there. Bishop to f4. I just wanted to kind of untangle. It was under fire here, but well, let's show a good move here. Knight to d5 is just winning for white. Hits the queen, defends the bishop, and then I can take his bishop off with check and move my bishop out of the way, and everything is fine. So that is the best move here, and a pretty simple win for white after that. The move I played, bishop f4. Let's back up, get to the same position. Bishop f4 leaves a big tactical shot here, which he didn't play. But here I have to give up the exchange. I can't drop back and defend against the pin, because he's got that square covered too many times after he's put the bishop here. So I have to take it, and then I can take this way. And what is this? This is a position where black is 1 pawn up. He was 2 pawns up for a bit. I got a pawn back, so he's 1 pawn up, and I have a knight and a bishop for a rook. So I'm still technically a little better here. But anyway, black certainly has good chances to hold this position. So that would be throwing away the win like that. Let's see. He went rook c to d8, so he just ignored that possibility, and then it's all okay once again. I take the rook, he takes back, and I move the queen out of the way. A better move here actually is rook to e3. If he tries the pin now, I take his queen, he takes my queen with check, but I take back, and so that just loses another piece. I'll have a rook and 2 pieces against his rook. So in fact he has to move his queen to the side, say queen d7, and then I can play bishop to e5, stopping his bishop from getting to this critical square, probably forcing a trade. If he avoids the trade, then I can just drop my rook back, and I'm still a piece up for 2 pawns, but it's a good position for me, and pretty straightforward win. I went queen e2 instead, and that is also a mistake, although by now he was so low on time he was having trouble finding moves. So he took, which was correct, I took back, and then he lost on time. But the problem is, in this simplified position, I've also given up another pawn for no particular reason. It would be, black would have 3 pawns against a piece. The chess engine still likes white. I mean, I have a good chance of, with my 3 pieces against his 2, of rounding up a few pawns and converting a win in the endgame, but it's no longer as certain as it was just a move before. Anyway, I thought it was an interesting, entertaining game in spite of those mistakes. Hope you guys enjoyed it, and I will see you next time. Bye.